record on this computer. Right. So we wanted to sit and have a little chat for you to get to know who we are, the kind of constituency that I was telling you about. The persons here are, well, we have several professionals in HR, but of course we also have some of the lecturers who may be HR persons, but sometimes have their specializations elsewhere. So for instance, Professor Hutton, he's in education and training. Trisha Dehaney is in training as well. She's a private consultant. Sophia Morgan is an org behavior specialist. She has a background in HR, academic HR, and she's also a consultant. So we have several people like that on our staff. Some of our lecturers are people who teach at high levels, so they're actually teaching now at other universities. So for instance, Myrtle Ware wanted to be here with us, but she couldn't be, and that sort of thing. Grace Martin Hall, I imagine she'll come on shortly. She's also a consultant. So we have persons who go around the place and they try to inject whatever they know into organizations to solve problems. And we are training the next group, the next set of leaders in this country, organizational leaders. We hope to change organizations through injecting our students into them with ideas, with new techniques, and as you will help us with disruptive thinking. So you inspired me, and I was telling the group that I approached you boldly to say to you, you're helping companies overseas, and here is Jamaica languishing. We need something to inspire us. So I was asking you if you would give us an hour of your time so that you could tell our students something that would inspire them to carry back to their teams, so that we can build Jamaica that way. And you blew my mind by giving us far, far, far more than I could have dared to ask for. But we'll see that unfold as the months go by. But you were telling me that inspiration alone is not enough. And so you described what I'm now calling your 3I model. I don't know if you actually said that, but your 3I model. And I wanted the group to hear that, because in listening to you there, I said, I have to find the money and actually take the full-blown leadership training course to be coached for a year by you so that I can go out and conquer the world. And so I leave it to you to share this knowledge with the HRD students. So of course, our usual HRD, round of applause for Alvin Day. And of course, welcome also to Captain Hunter.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. You have been most gracious, very kind, and I truly appreciate that. I must also say that I extend my thanks to those of you who exercised the patience to wait for me. Because my human frailty showed today. I tended to believe that I can get more done in an hour than should be humanly possible, and subsequently in a day and in a week. And so I end up jamming my schedule in ways that this afternoon compromised me. So thank you for your patience. I imagine that you must be very busy and you stayed and you waited. So now I want to just pick up on the notion of the introduction. Yes, I have these 3 I's. There are actually more than 3, and I don't know that time will allow us to go into much more today. But the idea of inspiration is really important, and I don't want to dismiss it in the sense that it sounds like that's not good. It is really wonderful, but rather to put it in context. If you're not inspired, you're in trouble. The word inspiration, I believe, has etymological roots to breathing in, inspire, breathing in. And so it is critical. I'd like you to think about it like getting oxygen. Expires to breathe out, for example, or to breathe out so much that you can't even live. When you're expired completely, you're dead. So inspiration is really important. And I want to shift the language a little bit today by telling you that inspiration is not enough, and why. When I was a little boy, before I was a little boy, when I was in my mother's belly, my family wanted me to be aborted. One of my uncles said to my mother, "Why don't you have an abortion and spare us of the embarrassment?" You see, when she got pregnant, she was 15 point something years old. When I was ready to come out, she was 16 years old. And my family was a conservative, Christian, quiet, well-behaved family where that kind of thing did not happen. And thank God for my mother, she ran away, she had this as a boy. So my troubles began early. But I had oxygen. I had oxygen. I could inspire. I grew up as the happiest child I'd ever met at the point. In Frankfield, Clarendon, going to one of the greatest schools God ever invented, Edward Allen, as I often say. I hope you feel the same about your school. And I came to realize as I grew up, that life was wonderful because I could live and breathe and move. I didn't think of myself as being poor, even though for 20 years of my life, we did not have electricity, we didn't have running water, we didn't even have an inside toilet. I used to bathe for my wonderful trips to Edwin Allen in the Rio Mina, which fortunately ran at the back of my house through the back of my yard. But I had oxygen and I breathed and I was happy and I made my own toys at Christmas and I planted food and really never went hungry because only the folks living in the concrete jungle, well, the cities, have that problem because in the countryside of Jamaica, things grow on trees so easily. They grow wild sometimes. But I was not the only one, and I don't even think that my story is unique. There are lots of folks who grew up there. And if you go to Frankfield today, you'll hear stories of a lot of violence taking place, and there were some big gang things that took place that you may have heard about. My good friend who lived 2 doors away from me, and I won't call his name, he and I used to sit at my gate and we used to dream. We would breathe in deeply and watch the moon come up and watch the moon go down. Sometimes it started in the middle of the sky and we'd watch it go down and we'd talk till 2 o'clock in the morning, dreaming and just breathing in the possibilities of the future. We did that night after night. My grandmother used to say, boy, come to your bed. And so when I went to bed, I opened the door and I went and studied for the next day. When my friend went to bed, he opened his door and went to bed, went to sleep. And I worked hard and I worked hard into the morning. And I did everything that I could because I had the ability to dream and to hope. My friend, I'm sad to say, did not have the same fate. He grew up in a life of incredible violence. I saw him in the United States about 20 years later, and he was smelling of alcohol in the morning, and he had many knife marks in his face, 2 or 3 knife marks in his face. And then about 2 years later, I heard that he had died. A young man. And I don't want to use him as an example. I want to suggest to you that having the ability to breathe, which he and I had at the same time, same place, same circumstances, more or less, not enough. A dog knows how to breathe. A baby knows how to breathe. I knew how to breathe. You know how to breathe. If I came here today and tried to inspire you, it'd be a wonderful thing. It feels good to have lungs that are filled with oxygen and you have the ability to use the energy from oxygen to move and do what you want to. But there's something else that's needed. When I wrote my first couple of books, Ian Bowen, God rest his soul, you may remember Ian Bowen, who had Profile. He had me on Profile 2 or 3 times. And each time I had to warn him, and he still couldn't help himself not to invite me, not to introduce me as a motivational speaker. And he said, what's wrong with motivational speaker? Well, I'll tell you what, to be inspired and motivated is wonderful, better than not being that way. But if you have all this incredible feeling of euphoria and so forth, and you feel like you can conquer the world, and then you go home and the problems are still there, and the child has messed up the carpet, and the cat has gone and torn up your clothes, and all the bills are still waiting to be paid, and the emails that you're afraid to answer are still there, what happens to the inspiration then? Yeah. So here's the thought. If you want to be really good in your life, if you want to feel like your life is working out, it is important that you be inspired because it is the very basic of life. The inspiration is the energy to get out of bed because you have oxygen coursing through your vein or through your veins. But what you do with that is what makes the difference. It is necessary for me to live my life in such a way where I have insight. And insight is probably synonymous with wisdom, understanding, knowledge, learning, gathering facts and observations about life, not just for the factual or knowledge or academic value of it, but for the application of it. How much insight have you gotten in your life? How much insight have you put together out of all the information that you've learned and are imparting to others? Out of all the information that you are in the in the process right now of answering letters to and taking exams for and executing exams for? How much insight do you have? Have you crossed the border between knowledge and wisdom is the question. And so I suppose my starting out this way is just to give you a little sense that the ability to grow up in Jamaica and be regarded as somebody who makes a contribution is dependent not just on your ability to feel good at times, to feel elated, to feel inspired. It's a good thing, it's a wonderful thing. But that you be in the pursuit of wisdom, which is not common, they say. They say that common sense is not common. This pursuit of wisdom is not common. There are too many people get out of school thinking that having their degree is good enough for them. And they get into the workforce and they hit the hard practicalities of life and realize that people with degrees get in trouble, people without degrees get in trouble, and you have to distinguish yourself by having the insights to understand what is necessary for you to attain and sustain excellence in your life. So that's my little introductory piece, and I want to, not to keep it a mystery, the last one I want to talk about is influence, but let me pause for a moment, and I want to get your thoughts and feedback on the notion that it is not enough to be alive and to be breathing. It is critical that you have some wisdom, and that wisdom can be represented as savvy, as judgment, as decision making, as making sure that you have the right people around you to support you, as recognizing that you're not enough all by yourself, and that it is entirely possible for you to check the boxes and have the degrees and at the same time be missing those things. Can anybody identify with that? Is it something that resonates with you, that we pursue not knowledge but wisdom? If you would put your audio on and just share a thought, how does that first thought resonate with you, please?
I was thinking that when you move away from knowledge to wisdom, then you move into a broader state of application. So, for example, your knowledge may hit a wall in that you are not, or you get into something that is new, but then there are some what they might call softer skills or something else, that
Yes.
would cause you to be able to handle new situations. It's like when a student moves away from just knowing something to being able to apply it. I think you have knowledge, you apply knowledge, but wisdom transcends that, I think. So that's my opening, Sally.
That's right. That's right. Yes. And we'll talk about those soft skills in a moment. Yeah. And I realize this is perhaps sensitive is too strong a word, but this is an important issue because I'm speaking with folks who are in academics, and academics imparts knowledge. Now, it should be argued that academics imparts wisdom, but what we're talking about here is the difference between them. So yeah, you're right. And I just want to see if anybody else has a thought. Now, when I'm working with NCB or Bank of Jamaica or some other place, I have my ways. And so let me exercise some of them. Miss Marcia Bryan, what do you make of that first positioning that talks about the distinction between inspiration and insight? Now, inspiration is, of course, having capabilities to learn, but to learn not just data, but to learn wisdom. If you would put your audio on, please. Ms. Mark, are you there?
Good evening, sir. Thank
Yes.
you. Can you repeat, please?
Yes.
Those
What do
have
you
some
make?
technical problems.
Yes. Okay, great. So my question for you is, do you have any perspectives to share? Can you see any relevance in the need to pursue human insight and wisdom as a way to build knowledge, and that knowledge is not enough? And where this conversation is headed is the technical difference, is the distinction between technical competency and what it takes to succeed in the working world. Do you see this as relevant? Have you seen this manifest at all in people's lives where they have the knowledge and don't necessarily have the wisdom?
Yes, yes, sir. It is very relevant because knowledge is knowing what to do, but with the information given, wisdom is the application of it. And most times the persons have the knowledge, the information, but don't know how to apply it. And I think that it's very critical that we differentiate and give a definite distinction between each for
Yes,
us to progress.
right, right. So Marcia, great. I'm a little boy from Frankfield. I have not had high cultural exposure. I basically grew up in the bush and there's no electricity at night and so forth. And I happen to get decent enough marks where I go to the University of the West Indies. And I learn all these wonderful things about HR and policies and salaries and staff engagement. And I'm learning this stuff and it's hard and I'm working as hard as possible to reproduce it in exams so I can get my grades. And I do that very well. And I get a job at Flow or I get a job at Digicel. Where do I get this knowledge? Where do I get this wisdom? I mean, I've been so busy coming out of the bush, out of my family's environment where there's not really a lot of success story for me to emulate. How do I get this wisdom so that I don't go to Flow and embarrass myself? How does that work?
Huh. Um, you can get it from even persons that you might come into contact with in the organization, or even if in the internet, it's a world wide web, information is there. If you're that hungry for that knowledge and wisdom, you can seek it.
Yes, yes. So that's a great option right there. It's not like in the days when I was a little boy, we didn't have the internet and all these videos that can impart knowledge and wisdom from any angle. So very good. So we look outside of ourselves, right? We find it through the means of the digital world around us and getting from others, right?
Yes.
Thank you for that thought.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, so let's speak on somebody else. Mr. Cleveland Palmer. Can you hear me? You would have to put your audio on.
Yes, good evening. I think
Good
we're on
evening.
we're on the same tandem. That knowledge is raw, and wisdom is knowledge applied given in a particular context. So unless you understand the context, you have that insight of the inner workings of the people and the organization and those other variables outside of just the raw facts, then you really can't go develop and achieve as you'd like, because you know of the thing, but you don't know the depths of the
Understood.
thing.
Right. So now you take that little boy again, and maybe I'm from inner city Kingston, like my business manager, Captain Calvin, is. And Captain Calvin grew up with lots and lots of people with lack of vision, and they're basically scrounging and looking to keep alive, and they're operating probably at a survival level. And he works hard. He goes to University of the West Indies and gets his incredible degrees and does his master's in accounting, and he's learning all the technical skills. So now here comes the internet. And as Marcia said a while ago, yeah, he can go on the internet, he can get videos and so forth to teach him and so forth. But most of the times he's just entertaining himself to give himself a little space from all the studies. How does a child distinguish between all the junk on the internet that is teaching bad values and bad thinking and know to find the ones that are really good and constructive? Now, I'm asking this in the context of somebody who's in HR and presumably has the best interest of the student and the institution at heart. Where does a Captain Calvin Hunter growing up in Alman Town find the guidance even to distinguish between the advice that is destructive and the advice that's constructive? Mr. Cleveland, or Mr. Palmer, I should say.
And look at the difference. It can be difficult given lots of variables. I'm not sure the answer. I have to think about it a bit more.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It is tough.
It is.
Well, if I may,
Yes.
Cleveland is my classmate, so I want to help out. I immediately think about those of us who either raise children or who teach children, and they are exposed to so many things on the internet, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, you name it. They inherit it, swallow it, absorb it, the works. And for you as the person who is giving the guidance to ensure that they are guided by the right information, you either have to have that child or that ward. You have to guide them, meaning you have to show them that not everything you see is true online. And of course, a child will ask, then what is true? Then you'd have to show them, okay, this is CNN, this is BBC, these are the authority figures on certain information, and this is where you go to confirm if the information is true or right. Also, you look at experts. And now coming back to the HR field, we look at the experts in the field, the SMEs, the subject matter experts. So if it is that there's a new role in the office and the CEO is just like, oh, I can just learn about what this person should do on YouTube, Instead, as the HR expert, you will say, okay, well, this other company has these experts employed. Let us get advice from them. What does it entail? So in essence, whatever we see online is always good to go to the experts in real life to find the information, as well as go to those expert websites. So if it's something HR related, you go to the HR websites. If it's medically related, you go to the medical websites. So there's always some authority that still exists. Of course, there are a lot of fake websites out there, but that's why the real person expert is so important.
Right. So it is coming to understand that we don't have it all, and we need to confide in others. We need to seek insights from others and figure out who knows. Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So now,
sorry, I wanted to add one thing too. I was thinking that you have to have a vision of the future. And if you have that vision and you're relentless in trying to pursue where it is that you feel you want to go, then you'll begin to sift out things that will help you get there and ignore the things that either don't help or are leading you in a different path.
Yes. Very good. Very good. All right. Anybody else on this issue? Thank you for sharing that. By the way, it may seem like it's very basic, and it's something that's easy for us to think through. And the question is, why would we start our conversation there? I'm in yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah. So let me hold that thought. Hold that thought, please, Sophia. I am in the position where I sit in front of senior executives in large, highly power-driven companies, where senior executives don't get it. They bank their reputations often on their degrees and their doctorate and their mastery subjects. And they have been rewarded in the past for the technical skills they bring to the job. And all of a sudden, the world is changing. And now people are saying, well, wait a minute, the technical skills are not enough. I sit in front of people often who get upset because somebody else got promoted and they're smarter than the other person. They know more about the subject than the other person, and they are mystified as to why they wouldn't have gotten that promotion. And it is this variable that's missing that we're talking about here. So yes, please go ahead. Go ahead with your comment.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure.
So I like this question because it's personal to me. It's personal because my name means wisdom. So I learned that actually in my first year on campus. A lecturer, a philosophy lecturer said to me, do you know your name means wisdom? It's from two Greek words, which means the lover of knowledge. So I really have since then, and I would say that decades ago, embarked on this journey of trying to figure out what does it mean to be wise? What does wisdom mean? And it's also interesting because, everybody has, a prayer. Like I find that every time I pray, I say, Lord, grant me wisdom, grant me wisdom. But I've never even pondered it. Recently, I came upon that same question you were asking. What's the difference between knowledge, learning, you know, understanding, you know, all those synonyms. And yes, as everybody's saying, knowledge is about the acquisition of information. So knowledge is easy to come by. All of us are exposed and we have access to knowledge through the internet, through school. But as we know, having knowledge is one thing, but being able to apply it, as we've said, is another thing. And why aren't we able to apply what we know? And I think here is where wisdom comes in. So for me, in defining wisdom, wisdom is comes from inside. For me, wisdom is something not that you gain in an overt way, but some is a process of growth and development. So for me, wisdom also comes from a set of values that you define out for yourself, that you use to guide everything that you do. So some values are based in, you know, religion or spirituality, but it is always about being conscious of how these values help to guide the decisions that we make in life. So without these values, we don't fully activate, for me, our intelligences. And for me, it's all intelligences that combine, that constitute this notion of wisdom that we're talking about. So social, emotional, intellectual, you know, intelligences combined that provides for me a kind of sixth sense. So wisdom also includes that sixth sense when you're in the moment, making the right choice, trusting your gut. And all of this, as I say, the base of it is these values that we hold and that we use to define our lives and everything that we do in our lives. So yeah, I mean, there's much more, as I tell you.
Yeah.
This is something near and dear to me, but I'll leave it at that. So wisdom, you know, it's something we acquire, but it's not an overt process. You know, it's yeah, you go about it, but it forms and builds and grows until one day you're like, ooh, wow, how am I able to make these wise decisions? So that's my 2 cents. Hope it's helpful.
Well, I'm sitting here listening to you, Sophia. Is it so? You say Sophia? Is that how you pronounce it?
Sophia. Let me
Sophia or
be
Sophia? Okay, great. So
Sophia. Yes.
Sophia is the movie star pronunciation. Got it.
All right.
And-
Sophia is the Jamaican. Sophia.
That's right.
But
Sophia.
I like Soph. I like Soph. Soph
Right.
is good.
I'm sitting here thinking, what words do I use to say that is a truly excellent and a profound response to the issue on the table? It is no wonder they named you the way they did. And I never really made the connection. The wisdom word is the Sophia word, right?
Yes, yes,
And it
yes.
comes from the same Greek root as sophistication, right?
Yes.
Yes, and you know the whole story about the Greek sophists and all their pursuit of
Yes.
knowledge and so forth. So,
Yes.
so I think you were properly named because you gave some tremendous insights there. One of the things you pointed to a while ago is that, and you may not have used these words, but I think you'll agree with me based on what you said. Wisdom is not this sort of absolute thing that is objective and you can just point it out and see it. It is contextual. It is a function of values and culture and situations, right? And because of that, it's not easy. Sophia, do you agree? Am I correctly representing what you said?
Very, very, very correct. As I said, it's a personal journey to figure that out. Yes.
Correct. Captain Calvin and I are on a campaign as representatives of our company in Jamaica, as our sort of Jamaican representatives of the company, to help highly educated, highly accomplished professionals to understand from a philosophical and a practical level that Objectivity is overrated and absolute facts are overrated, and that the world of human beings is driven more by subjectivity and impression and perception than highly educated people who are novices would care to admit. What am I saying to you? In the spectrum of objective versus subjective, the educated mind often gravitates toward the objective because we can hang our hats on that, because we can push scientific process through that and validate reality through that. And if we put a certain set of chemicals in the test tube, we can predict the response, and that's objective because it's reliable and it's valid. And so the more sophisticated we get and the more knowledge we get about that process that was invented back in the 400 BCs, and this was formalized by Aristotle, the more we lean toward objectifying truth and relying only on those things that can be measured and predictably analyzed. Those things are important. They help us to make change at the store and they help us to build bridges. They're very critical to our material world. However, there's a great deal of your ability to succeed in your life, and for your life to work out, that depends on the non-objective, the subjective, the emotional, the feeling, the perceptual. And it's very difficult because it's not as manageable. If you are dealing with scientific facts, it's manageable. But to say that much of our success is dependent on subjectivity gives us a sort of soft and squishy world. And that's what makes us human. Now, for those of you who love facts, and I do too, I'm going to share some facts with you that might surprise you. Surprised me when I learned about them, because when I was doing my sixth form work at Knox College, because my wonderful Edwin Allen didn't have sixth form at the time, I used to say to myself that I pride myself on being an objective person driven by data and facts. I am methodological, the little mostly like a teenager boy. And I consider the facts, and I don't make decisions quickly. I weigh the facts and I come to conclusive decisions based on information. And that's a good thing. It served me pretty well. And then I got into business, and then I got into management consulting, and I got into leadership, and I began to deal with great people and people who aspire to greatness. And I've come to discover some things that have been truly shocking. I want to give you a scientific source for this data, and it is the Gallup organization. Now, the Gallup organization collects data from people across the world, and they come up with all kinds of mathematical models to try to predict the future, because after all, objectivity is supposed to be predictive because it's consistent. It's supposed to be. I have a report on my shelf about 6 feet away from me, where the Gallup organization, in a customer service session, quoted in their support material that human decisions are constituted 30% of facts and 70% of feelings. 30% of facts, 70% of feelings. I looked again, and it's bizarre to have a scientific organization come to that conclusion. I want you to process that for a moment. Do you want to be a success in life? It's a rhetorical question. It's a needless question even, because who doesn't? Other than the ones who are ill mentally, everybody wants to be successful by some subjective measure. But if you want to be successful, it is critical not to miss this, that your ability to succeed is not dependent on facts and objective details. It's dependent upon people, because success can only be measured when you get the appropriate feedback, and the feedback comes from the impression that you make. This is going toward the other eye, which is influence. The influence that you have on other people is what gives you the feedback mechanism to determine if your life seems to be worthy and worthwhile and making a difference that's positive. So in other words, if you were stuck on an island and you figured out a way to shelter yourself and to grow coconuts and grow vegetables, and you had a really wonderful system going, it could be argued that you're successful. But of what good is it? Of what good is it? You don't have anyone with whom to share it. You don't have anyone to say, attaboy, attagirl. What good is it? That's why they say success is not something that you do on an island. That no man is an island is the cliche that we hear about. And the reason is that our reality is subjective. Our reality is something that is a function of the feelings and impressions and perceptions and communication and the narrative and the prejudices and the biases of other people. And it's difficult to learn that in an algebra class. I shouldn't beat it that hard, because Captain Calvin, one of the reasons we have a business is because this eludes many people. Would you agree? and we're teaching leadership. Here's a question for you. It has to do with wisdom. How good and wonderful and excellent a person are you? How do you know? If I asked you, are you a good person? The answer is supposed to be yes. I wouldn't even ask the question. If I asked you if you're wonderful, the answer is supposed to be yes. If I asked you, are you trustworthy? The answer is supposed to be yes. After all, why do you put out so much effort trying to attain excellence as measured by the academic and professional things you do? How good, how wonderful, how trustworthy a person are you? How do you know? Is it up to you? Or is it up to the subjective perceptions of the people whom you influence? The people with all their biases and subjective impressions and lack of information and partial information. It kind of is a troubling question, wouldn't you agree? Let me make sure that my screen's working here. Captain, be my check here, please. Just let me know.
Yes, your video is off.
Yes, let me just make sure that I'm back on screen here. So as you ponder the question, let me fiddle as you think about it. Somebody tell me, how do you know how wonderful you are?
Good evening, Dr. Professor D. Hello?
Go ahead, I'm hearing you.
Oh, yes, sir. Well, firstly, transiamus in exemplum, sir.
Hello, I love it. That's our secret language. We won't tell the other Edwin Allenites, the other non-Edwin Allenites what that means. Go ahead.
No, sir. All right. How do I know? Well, I would want to believe that, as you rightly said, we learn within the context of people around us.
Yes.
You know, people, and I learn through action, how to judge myself. And I learn the reaction which comes from what I do from other people to know whether or not what I'm doing is, I would say, the safe path. Because I would not say that it's absolutely right, whatever people say about me, and is not necessarily so what they don't know about me. Because there are things as we would have learned in this program about the drawer window. There are things that we know of ourselves that other people don't know about us. But I would want to say it's the actions. It's my actions that determine who I am, because persons can say anything. So it's rather the actions, the things I do, and what people, applaud me for. Those are some of the measures that I use to determine how good of a person I am.
Okay. All right, wonderful. So that's a measure. That is a measure, and it's one that's not to be missed, because there are many people who speak one game and do another. Yeah. And they're regarded as hypocritical, disingenuous, and so forth. So yes, good input there. But may I challenge you? Mind if I challenge you?
Oh, sure, sir. You can go ahead.
Yeah. Actions are the manifestations of thought. Actions are effects. The causes are thoughts. And it is possible to see two people behave in exactly the same way, take the same action, and the effects are completely different, because one may be interpreted as good and one may be interpreted as bad in this world of subjectivity. Let me give you a bizarre example. There can be two cases of someone killing somebody else. One of them can lead to a person going to jail for life, and the other one can have the person exonerated because it's self-defense. So even the law makes a distinction. God makes a distinction, because for those of you who believe in God, as I do, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it is the heart of man. It is the internal motivation, inspiration, thought process that determines whether the man is righteous or wicked. In fact, the Bible says that all of us are wicked. We have wickedness in our hearts. So yes, it is critical on the one hand to ensure that that which we say we believe is manifested in our actions, and that's the basic level of integrity and authenticity. But everything has multiple levels, and the insight from this conversation, just to go back to our second I, is to recognize that our actions, our performance, our behavior needs to be driven by right motives, because you can have the same behavior driven by a sampai man and a con man, and one driven by a most sincere person of integrity, and both can do the same thing with different effects. Yeah. So ponder that. Ponder that. Now, the question on the table then is, how do you know if you're a good person? How do you know if you're a wonderful person? How do you know if you're trustworthy? And the way you know is dependent on how people give you feedback. They give you feedback based upon your actions, but they also give you feedback on how they read the reason for your action. Do you have a hidden agenda? What is it? Is it good? Do I accept it or not? I have a chart that I show in the leadership courses that says, how do you know if you're trustworthy? Who's the one who decides? Is it you? And sooner or later, the person with whom I'm speaking says, no, it's not really me. It's the person who would regard me as trustworthy or not who decides. Well, wait a minute. I'd never steal. I'd never lie. My words are true. My words are my bond, and so forth. And we have this device that I'm sure you learn about in your, or probably teach in HR courses, called the 360-degree performance assessment, where the staff member is assessed by manager, by peers, by direct reports, and others. And so you get this kind of full view of how the organization sees the person. And it's very frequent that someone will say to me, Mr. Day, I don't understand how the organization would rate me so low on trust, because that's my forte. I'm a trustworthy person. And then we initiate this conversation about, how do you know? So I have all this intention. I would never hurt a fly. And let me share this with you. The wisdom that we're talking about is not easy to come by, because sometimes it's counterintuitive. Sometimes it's deep and profound. Sometimes it's so easily visible that you can't see it. I think it can be so close to you that you can't see it, because the eyes don't focus that closely. I think it can be so big that you don't see it, because you can be looking at a wall and wondering why it's soft. And if you stood back far enough, you would see that it's not just a wall, it's an elephant. So sometimes the truth is so close we can't even see it. Sometimes it's deep and profound and hidden. Here's the deal with this thing about who you are and how you're seen. It is the other person who determines if you're trustworthy, if you're good and wonderful. There are 3 or 4 different buckets to consider in this particular thing called trustworthy or trustworthiness. And this is the chart to which I refer. If you do not have integrity, you're not trustworthy. So your word must be your bond. You must be honest. You must say and do the same thing and not have any difference between them. Fine. And that's where most people go right away. I'm trustworthy because I'm honest. But that's one of the 3 or 4 considerations, right? So the first one is character. You must have the character. The second one, and I only put it the second because I wanted to lead with the one that people believe most. The second one is another C called caring. If you don't care about me, I don't trust you. If I don't think you're a caring person, I cannot trust you, because you might throw me under the bus. When it's time to decide if I get the blame or you get the blame, you might give me the blame. If there is a conversation happening where my name is on the line and you don't care for me, you will not defend me. If you don't care for me, I don't trust you, because I cannot predict that your behavior is going to be on my behalf. There is an expression that I learned in Ohio that goes like this. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Ouch. I mean, but I spent all these years and I know so much. I want to unfurl all my knowledge, unleash my knowledge on the world. But wait a minute, they don't care. The people at the University of the West Indies with whom you interact every day, the students whom you teach, even the teachers for the bright student, they don't care how much this person knows until they know how much that person cares. Is that person a caring person? Is that a humane person? Is that person somebody who will not take decisions that will hurt others or hurt me? And then, of course, there are two others: competence. If you're not good enough to do this work, you're going to make us all look bad because we're part of the same team. You're going to make us look badly. So get your act together, man. Study the thing. Look, we are part of a multifunctional team. You're from this department. I'm from that department. And you're not holding up your end of the deal because you're not competent. Yeah, I can't trust you because you may cause us to fail in our project. So that's the third C. And then the fourth one is committed. You may be competent, but you're not committed. You don't take it seriously. You can have all the others fine, but if you're not committed to it, you're going to lead us all to embarrassment. You're going to frustrate us. So here's the deal. Let me go back.
Sorry, Trisha wants to say something when you're done. Okay?
Yes, thank you. And please do that. Please watch out for me because I can't keep up with all the scenes. Between you and Captain Calvin, Miss Alvin, let me know. Thank you. So hold on, Patricia. Here's the deal. Let me go back. I imagine that I don't need to ask you if you want to be successful. I imagine I don't need to ask you if you're a good person. My challenge for you is, do you really want to be a successful person? Do you know what it takes? It takes some insight and some wisdom and some savvy and some going beyond the mere facts. Because it arguably, I would say, because nothing is absolute in this context, arguably, it is impossible to be successful, to be a good person, to be a trustworthy person, unless you have the feedback mechanism coming from other people. That's why they say no man is an island. And that validation that you need is not objective, it is subjective. And it's going to lead us ultimately to the point of how, therefore, do you master the skills of influencing people at a level where it is not as dependable as 2 + 2 = 4. It's not as objective, it's very subjective. So with that, let me stop. Yes, Ms. Patricia.
Hi, good evening, and good evening, everyone, and thank you thus far. You touched on a few of the points, because one of the questions I was going to ask is about, absolute reality, because as you would have shared that, okay, who determines it? And then the question that I had in my head is not just, wouldn't much of it be based on one's own perception and how I occur to that person? And so even in that 360, different persons can observe and perceive me in a particular kind of way. And so when they make their own declaration, based on whether my competence, my character, and all of that, and they make their own declaration, we can go around and the declarations may be quite different. And so in the absence of the absolute reality, right, it then requires that a person would have to come into their own understanding of what trustworthy is, understanding those criteria that will be used. And at some point, we'll have to make a decision that, listen, I may not get validation. And even though we know that that is needed in the corporate world and how we function and all of this, that validation may not come from everyone, because our own perception can distort how I show up for someone, and the implication that has in the corporate world. And I wonder sometimes if that doesn't somehow lead us to put on as many masks as we put on, because of the recognition that in order for me to be perceived as being competent, I need to do this and do that. And so we go around wearing so many different masks, and maybe one day we are wondering, how the hell did I reach here? Who am I again? And so I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, very good. You touched on a very critical issue there, because that is certainly one way in which some folks deal with it. I have to be a different person here because the context is different. I have to be a different person there. And in that case, we can sort of be multiple personalities, which in itself will diminish the amount of trust that we get from the people giving us the feedback, because they will observe the inconsistencies. And yet there's a better way. There's a better way. We have to pick up this conversation in our next session, Ms. Alvin, because we're getting in pretty deeply here now. Let me touch on this for a moment. Goodness, trustworthiness, being a wonderful human being is not something you do. It's someone you are. It is someone you are. The elementary, I should say, step of wisdom is to recognize the distinction between that and knowledge. And the practice of it can go deeper and deeper, or depending on the metaphor, higher and higher. But there's a point at which you realize that you don't have to be different in the context. You just have to flex to suit the person with whom you're speaking. The depth of where you're tempting us to go here, Patricia, is the depth is, do you know who you are? And once you know who you are, the same you can interact with somebody from the ghetto, somebody from Frankfield, inner rural country, and Allentown, as well as somebody from Barbican and Beverly Hills. If I know my purpose in life, who I am, what I was placed here to do, if I understand my capabilities, my skills, and I am focused on contribution to others, it is because I will have already worked on myself. I will have already educated myself to develop this capability, to develop this skill, so I can now serve mankind. You're in a process where you're taking green members of organizations, or maybe you're one of them, and being taught or teaching people the skills and the capabilities of how to interact in the economic and social world and to add value. So in other words, if you've gone through a process of getting not only the academics, the knowledge, the skills, the technical competencies, but also figuring out who you are, understanding what you offer to society, then you should move from the place of just getting information to being able to impart value to others. When you are in the mindset of imparting value to others, and you know what value you can give based upon your natural skills and your education and your background, and you move from one situation into another, it is not a hypocritical situation where you're changing personalities. It's that you're adapting to my need, you're adapting to his need, you're adapting to her need. And you're dealing from a place of authenticity and sincerity where it is almost unquestionable. Now, I say almost, because we still have to come back and deal with the bad mind people and the good people and the people with honest sense and things, okay? If you understand what I'm saying. So we're in this sort of way of looking at the world, this metaphor is not designed to provide a solution or a strategic approach to everything in life. What we're talking about here is human beings, and human beings are not consistent. No two of them are equal, for example. So what we're seeking here is a way of operating in our lives that addresses the preponderance of occurrences or preponderance of behavior. In research, there is that terminology that says when we want to come to conclusive truth about how people behave in certain contexts for marketing, for other business reasons and social reasons, we don't need 100% of people to conform to a certain hypothesis. We need a critical mass so we can regard it as the preponderance of behavior, and we recognize that there are exceptions. In other words, what I'm suggesting to you is that what we're talking about here doesn't work all the time, and it doesn't work for everyone. But when you get to the place of critical mass where generally human beings will regard you as being a good person because, then that is something that you can hang your hat on. So here's the question, Patricia. Do you know who you are? Are you clear? And I say that, if you pardon me, putting you in the sort of representative position for all of us today. Are you clear on your purpose in life? Do you know the value that you offer to others? And when you are clear about those things, does it matter if you're speaking with somebody from Haiti or somebody from Canada or somebody from Jamaica? Because after you get past the cultural and language barriers, aren't you imparting the same value that you represent? Now, we haven't had time to dive into it, but that's the essence. Go ahead, please.
So I'm coming into my own, meaning that yes, I'm still discovering each day who I am, but I have understood a big part of what I believe to be my purpose. And that is when it comes on to imparting knowledge and helping people grow. So for example, when I'm at church and I'm with the kids, I'm in the children's department, I may do it differently, but what I'm trying to do is help them to grow, help them to recognize their own talents and skills and come into their own. But when I'm also in a training room with professionals, the way I do it may be quite different, but I'm still seeking to achieve that. And that for me is one of the core reasons, to be here, helping persons to grow and develop. And when I'm in these different spaces, the method that I use, the approach that I use may be a little different, but I can tell you that I feel so fulfilled I believe that I'm doing, and no, I don't feel like, okay, I'm schizophrenic, because you may see me with the kids. I'm not schizophrenic. You see me with the kids running up and down, being a fool, and then you may see me in a different space. I may sound different, I may look different, but at the core, I am being true to what I believe to be my purpose, or one of.
Exactly. Yeah. So that would you agree that pretty much addresses the question then of having to wear different hats and be like different persons? That addresses it because you're true to the core of who you are, correct?
Yeah, but I was just thinking about it, for example, in the corporate space where some persons, and I do agree that we don't have to, but I was just pointing out the fact that some persons, without coming into that their own, or some people come into their own, but they are willing to then switch to fit in and to gain that acknowledgement and to gain that promotion or whatever it is that they think they have to, because they believe that they now have to adjust in order to fit in and to work that space. So it was from that perspective that I came on from.
Yes, and sometimes our language, and you're right, sometimes our language puts us in a box or traps us, because when we talk about wearing different hats and being different people, different persons to different people, sometimes it sounds quote unquote pejorative, like a bad thing. But sometimes the thing about which we're talking in essence is an amoral thing. And it's not a bad thing to wear different hats in different circumstances. It is a matter of the motivation and the intention. So sometimes the language you use makes it seem like it's a bad thing, but it's not necessarily. Yeah. Okay, very good. So let me do a process check and go back. Ms. Alvin, how are we doing on time? I will make time available because I know I was late, but tell me, because I know that folks on the line
you and I had said an hour and a half. I didn't have any limits.
Okay, great. Yes. Okay, I just wanted to be sensitive to the expectations of the team, so we keep rolling. Very good. All right, so let's come back to the notion then of whether you know who you are or not, and then who are you?
Sorry, Jonada had another comment.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, Dr. Day. All right. In relation to that question,
I'll take Professor for that.
Okay. All right. So Prof. In relation to that question that Trisha asked us, that you asked Trisha just now about whether she knows who she is. Is there is there an age or a period in your life when you can actually say, okay, this is who I am? And the reason for me saying this, we would have gone through the education system. A lot of us, when we stood up in grade 4, we stood and the teacher asked us what you want to be when you grow up. And we have all of these answers. But I'm not sure what is the statistics on the number of persons who actually be or become who they said that they would at that age. Now, you have some persons also, they venture off on a path due to, necessities and situations in their personal life would have altered the direction that they choose. Would you then say that a person who sets out and is successful, though that may not be who they wanted to become, would you say that that person has fully understood who they are, even though they are comfortable with, as Trisha said, she helps out in church. A lot of people help out in church, and that is not necessarily who they are. So, and also my next question, if it is
hold on a second, before you go to this next one, just so we don't lose it. Just rephrase that first question in one sentence, because I heard 2 or 3 different strands there. Tell me.
Okay, so what I want to know, is there a particular age when one begins to know who they are?
Okay.
Since growing up, you would have had so many different experiences, and I would want to believe that it is your experience that begins to shape who you are, because when you go into different experiences, you're exposed to different needs, you're exposed to different desires, you're exposed to even different skill set that would allow you to even help persons in different respects. So how then can you know if that person is you?
Got it. Okay. And then your second, thank you. And then your second question.
And then my second question in relation to that now, from a biological perspective, a full human being is 46 chromosomes, meaning I get 23 from my father, 23 from my mother. So who am I? Who am
Okay,
I?
so yes, so we will. Really, let's leave it there and then come back to it just the way you stated. Okay.
Okay.
43.
Professor Hutton also has a comment.
Yes, I see. Okay, great. So 43 chromosome who I. Right, got it. All right. And so, yeah, Professor Hutton, yeah, go ahead with yours and then I'll come back. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just kind of searching in terms of us as human beings and the issue of purpose. Is it that our purpose is determined, and so we are just following on and what is already determined? Or is it that we determine our purpose? Isn't that our personal qualities play
All
a
right.
significant role, or enthusiasm, or passion, or determination? Isn't that imagination, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a quality that can take us in a different universe? We won't be able to live on a spaceship, but I feel that this quality of imagination, where we can seek to understand another planetary system, is really out of us. It's really going to be determined by us. And so I want you to respond. Is it purpose determined, or is it this that we have to determine our purpose?
Got it.
We live our life, or
Understood.
we involve our personal qualities.
Understood. All right, wonderful, wonderful. All right, some very, very heavy duty things, right, Captain Calvin? Very heavy duty things taking place.
Indeed, indeed.
And I love this. I love this conversation, and I really am looking forward to pursue this forum with Ms. Alvin over the upcoming weeks and months. But I must give you a warning. I love concepts and theories and philosophies and so forth to a fault. But one of my I should say that, one of my characteristics that I pride myself on is if I cannot convert it to practical application to my life, then it's just a mental exercise. So I'll get into deep philosophical conversations about perception of reality and truth and what is and so forth. But there's something in my mind, maybe it's just the practicality of growing up on the ground as a barefoot boy, to say, okay, so what difference does that make? All of that. How does it affect my behavior, my life, my success, and so on? So I am taking all of this, not just from its philosophical worth, but how it affects our lives as human beings working at the University of the West Indies, working in HR and so forth. Let's go to the first one. Who you are. Is it a function of age? At what age? I'm going to make some assumptions and some connections here, and then I have bad news for you. When you ask, at what age do you know who you are? I'm going to enlarge it, or at least connect it to the idea of coming into fullness about yourself and your purpose. Not just knowing who you are, but getting to a place in your life where you're going, oh my gosh, I was born to be this. I was born to do this. The numbers that I've seen are not very encouraging. In the book, Think and Grow Rich, there's some indication of this in showing that the vast majority of human beings never get there. The vast majority. And I only give you that as one source. There are all kinds of sources I've seen that say in the world of human beings, the majority of human beings are followers, not leaders. They wake up in the morning, they go down the street, they turn left, they go right, they park their car, or they get off the bus, they go somewhere because they have a job and because their boss is expecting it. And in terms of how their day goes, they're going to see. They basically are stimulus response behaviors. And they don't take charge. The vast majority of students and teachers, professors at the University of the West Indies, as in any other institution, are people who just go based upon what happens and they react to it. It's a very saddening thing because we pride ourselves on being optimists. Captain Calvin Hunter is one of the greatest leaders of the optimist movement that the world has ever seen. As a Caribbean leader a few years ago, he was rated by the Optimist International as having the best system, being a Caribbean leader. And we naturally, I teach empowerment and I teach configured thinking for possibility. And it's very distressing for us to come to realize, on the contrary, to how we are naturally inclined, that the vast majority of people never even ask the question or seek their life purpose. Further, according to the book Think and Grow Rich, the vast majority of the minority who do so in their latter years. After sex and sports and other forms of entertainment have sapped the energy in youth, sooner or later people get to 40 and 50 years old and begin to wonder, what's this all about? And it is in 50 and 60 and 70 that some of them get to start saying, why am I here? What have I learned? Where do I want to go? Perhaps challenged by the notion that they're mortal and they're getting up to that age. So it's not a good answer. Very few people get there. It gets even to the point where in my field of business, the ones who might be called experts will tell us over and over in different places that only 2% of the population think. The other 90% do what the thinkers tell them to do. So 2% of the people are figuring out what happens to the 98. Shocking, isn't it? You don't want to believe that. Now, why? We can pontificate about this. I'll tell you what I think. I believe that the system was designed by colonialists and previous types of systems to manufacture workers for the cog and the wheels and the machinery of industry, to teach them monofunctional skills so that they get a job as an accountant, a job as an operator, a job as a factory worker on this particular line, and that they are there to be efficient in one thing, but that the deeper yearning for transcendence and greatness and being is not taught in schools, because if those things were taught in schools, it would be difficult to get employees to sit still and do one thing. Gosh, right now at the Bank of Jamaica, I have people who are economists, they're statisticians, they're mathematicians, they're strategists, and so forth. And they're brilliant. That's how you get one of those jobs. But every now and again, I hear people, well, what if I want to do this and I want to do that as well? I'm going to go back to school, I'm going to study this. Well, BOJ is a wonderful institution. But the system in general of employment is designed to get people to have a functional expertise that will be highly efficient and drive productivity for industry. So that's one of the reasons. Another one of the reasons is the way we were taught to think. When you were a child, you spent many years being rewarded and punished for subjects like algebra and mathematics, where every question had one right answer and every other answer was wrong. But again, that's a very elemental aspect of reality, where we talk about the material world, and it's good for making change and it's good for building bridges, I say. But there's so much deeper than the material world that is necessary, that when we get so accustomed to the Aristotelian scientific process of putting our weight on materially validated things that are empirically verifiable, statistically significant to the 98% confidence level, plus or minus 2, and we say that's what's real for us, we negate the possibility that there's a whole world of reality, of imagination. Now we come to the second question by transition, and I'm not done yet, but that imagination is what creates human experience. So yeah, let me repeat, the answer is not good. Most people don't even do it, and the ones that do it later. Now, thankfully, because of technology and the abundance of information, the ubiquity of knowledge through the internet, young people now sometimes are wiser than old people. Not always. They have a lot more knowledge, and sometimes they use the knowledge without wisdom. But now young people are able to achieve a greater level of development if they have that curiosity, because the information is available of others who have done it, and they can learn it without having to wait on the chronology of going from the 5th grade to the 6th grade, or from sophomore to senior. I hope I'm making sense there. History has not been favorable. Most people never get there in terms of understanding life purpose. And if we are going to have this conversation from month to month, I am going to be digging into your brain and asking you, why are you here? Do you know who you are? Do you want to get to your deathbed and look back and wish that you had dared to follow that imagination? Are you living right now on the edge of tomorrow, or are you looking back in the past? Are you a visionary person trying to manufacture reality in your mind, thinking of what could be and asking questions about why not? What if, and daring to step into the future where there is no empirical data that has already been registered in the past? You're daring to define reality based upon your imagination, because those are the people who fall into that 2% who define the world for the 98% who follow. So in one way or another, I'm going to be challenging you with that, because had it not been for that way of thinking, that way of being, I would never have made it out of the rural areas of Frankfield, where I could be sitting near a gas station as rub something on my hand and a big amount of money. Captain Calvin would never have made it. There has to be this vision of possibility that has not yet been validated by historical, empirical reality, that's percolating in your brain, that's jarring you and making you dissatisfied with the idea that you're taking things for granted and you're too easily satisfied and you're complacent. This is what I should say at the end, but I'm there now because the subject calls for it. I'm going to be troubling you and bothering you and urging you to consider that you think you're wonderful because you have a bachelor's. You think you're wonderful because you have your PhD. You have not yet begun. Because if you use data and knowledge and facts to validate your worth in the world, you're in shifting sand, because facts are infinite these days. We live in the information age, and every moment more information is being produced. There was a time when you could be regarded as being brilliant because you learned everything about a particular subject. That time has long passed, because when you have a PhD, you don't know a lot about everything, but you know a lot about one thing. You don't even have that anymore, because it's coming off the presses constantly. New websites are being formed, new theories are being pursued, new information is being gathered. So yeah, that's where we're headed, to mess with your thinking, because that's causal. Behavior is effect. Okay, so there you go. So now let me get to this question about purpose. Here's another profound one. Oh my goodness, the question was regarding, is our purpose something that is determined, or is it a function of imagination? This goes back to the age-old philosophical debate between determinism and free will. And intellects have been debating this for a long time, and nobody really wins. And I'll tell you why in a moment. Professor, I agree with you that it seems to be that you intimated in your expansion on the question that imagination has heavy weight. And I agree with you, it is not predetermined what your purpose is in life, in any way that we can measure, for sure. That your imagination, that your vision, that your feelings, that your perception, that your emotion, that your temperament come together to determine, I'm trying to stay away from that word, come together to create what that purpose is. So now, if your purpose is not determined, why do you search for it? Let me give you an example of the challenge that we face here. When you look at the world as a dichotomy of predeterminism or free will, you never can resolve it, because in this particular context, the answer is a dualism. It's both at the same time. So this concept of dualism, some of you are very familiar with that conversation of two things happening that are not necessarily supposed to go together, two opposite truths coming together to create reality. It is both free will and something that you don't have any control over that come together to make up your purpose, at least the purpose that would best serve you. Look, we have close to 50 people on the line. And if we had the time, if we're in the same room, I might just point out and say, what do you think? What do you think? I'd ask you, close your eyes and imagine something, anything you want. And then ask you to open your eyes and say, what did you imagine? What did you imagine? What came to your mind? What flashed before your eyes when you were thinking? Chances are very unlikely that you'd find 2 people out of 50 who imagine the same thing. See? So imagination comes out of the human being who's doing the imagining. And when I ask people to go figure out your life purpose, and I take them through a process that we have to help them get to life purpose, at least the makings of it, some people say to me, well, Mr. Day, how do I know if I'm wrong? How do I know if I'm right? I may think that my life purpose is this, and I may be wrong. And the answer is, if you thought of it, you thought of it. Because what you thought of, somebody beside you would never, ever think of it. When I was a child growing up, if you asked me what I was going to be when I grew up, I would never, ever tell you a medical doctor. I would never, ever, it would never escape my mouth. because I cannot stand hospitals. I cannot stand the smell of medicine when I walk into a hospital. I cannot stand the philosophical implication of sickness and facing human mortality. I cannot stand the needles. When I have to go to the doctor and the doctor asks me, do you have any allergies? I say, yes, sir. And said, what is it? I say, or yes, ma'am. I say, needles. I'm allergic to needles. I cannot stand anything to do with hospitals and sickness and medicine. Okay. So in other words, if you take two human beings and ask them to imagine something that is good and wholesome and wonderful, they're going to come up with different things, not just because of the imagination, but because of the heart from which the imagination is coming, the individual, because of the past experiences from that which that imagination is made, because of the conditioning from childhood that led to that entity that's doing the imagination. It is a dualism, you see, because some of the things that are contributing toward your life purpose are things that you did not choose. They were given to you, like your temperament. We have a temperament, a wiring, and a predilection toward a certain personality type, or mix of personality types. And that was given to us biologically or by some act of nature or God's hand in your life. You did not choose your home, your neighborhood where you were born. You did not choose your family. You did not choose your mother or your father. So those were givens. But now the question is, how do you put those things together and your experiences to come up with what you value? So the answer to this question is it's neither determinism or free will, just imagination. It is a function of the ability to deal with both. And it may not be as gratifying an answer as the more definitive this one or that one. But that's life, man. That's the reason why we need insight. That's the reason why we need perspective and wisdom and the ability to negotiate between all the factual things and come up with the right answers. Because life is really dualism. All the good people you know are bad, and all the bad people you know are good. Wait a minute. All the good people you know are bad, and all the bad people you know are good. That'll really upset some folks to hear me say that, because our definition on good or bad are very objective definitions, and they're even spiritual, eternal kind of definitions. But let's talk about God for a moment. You know, people see the things that I've been fortunate to do, and they think I'm wonderful, I'm smart. No, that's not the truth. God loves me. That's why I get to do what I do. And so, what defines me is that I was not random. I was not a biological miracle. I was a determined decision by God, and I'm being led to understand it through my imagination. In other words, let's talk about God for a minute. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. You want to be wise, it begins with a spiritual connection with a transcendent being greater than you. But I'm not trying to preach here and to try to change people's minds. I'm saying that this wisdom that we're seeking is not just a practical sort of scientific wisdom. It is a wisdom that is a combination of the practical, social, emotional, and spiritual things. The beginning of it is to fear God. So that's what's my makeup. Let me stop there for a minute. And I don't intend to finish the thing today. I'm diving in as you've asked questions. Any other comment? And Miss Olivine,
Ricardo has made 2 valiant efforts to interject. Yes. So Ricardo, I don't know if you're still willing.
Yes, go ahead, please, Ricardo. Put your audio on. We can't hear you, Ricardo.
You're muted, Ricardo.
All right, I got it. One of the things I was making in the point earlier is, in terms of knowledge, and I remember being told that knowledge is power, but power is the use of knowledge. And there are a lot of persons who are collecting knowledge and they're just storing it, and they're not using it, they're not applying it. And that is one of the key things where you mentioned a lot of executives have these wonderful academic qualifications, but they don't know how to apply it in that environment. And it's one of the things where I was also taught when I was younger that when you see problems, you see opportunities. And it's just one of those things when you talk about inspiration is to actually look further. Other persons mentioned just being able to sit in my backyard and envision a life outside of that and being able to decide, okay, I don't know what is down there, but I'm going to find out. And is having that ability to know that you can explore. I did that as a child where I would get off the bus from school and I wondered, where did the bus go? And there are times when I sat down on the bus and I took the bus and the bus went to Augustine and I said, oh, so this is where the bus stops. And I go back and then I wonder where the bus go after East 14. And I went to Gordontown and I explored. So a lot of times we have these shackles that we would put on our children and they don't want to go beyond the community to explore or to get anything done. And this is one of the things that we have to do when we're talking about inspiring our children. We have to let them know that they don't need to be afraid to actually step beyond the community to explore, and they're not just restricted. And I think that is going to be very important for each person when they walk into an organization. Because I am 25 years old, just graduated, and you are 50 years old and you're twice as old as me, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be restricted by your experiences. I'm going to come in, I'm going to do something differently, and we're all going to learn from each other.
Very well said. Yes. Yes.
Prof. Hutton wants to come back in.
Yes. One thought. Yeah. One thought. One second, Professor Hutton. One thought that you've stimulated here in your comment. You are HR. All 44.
That's correct.
You are all HR. And the things about which we are speaking here needed to be taken from the conceptual to the practical and the pragmatic. When you get into corporate, or as you prepare youngsters to get into corporate, it is necessary to help the people in corporate to deal with these challenges because they face these challenges. They go to work without a purpose sometimes. They think that it's okay just to have the knowledge. And so the way in which you would want to instruct a child and help the child not be limited by your adult experience, the same way you need to be prepared yourself as a reservoir of value to impart that value to people on the inside. So in a future discussion, we're going to talk about HR in the corporate world when it gets out there. Here we're just talking about you preparing your own minds to be a person of value now. But there are very practical ramifications of this way of thinking and being, to know that mankind is in trouble. Oh gosh, if you're the most optimistic person, if you're wise at all, you'll know that mankind is in trouble. And HR can play a critical role in nation building in Jamaica when the HR practitioners have the orientation that is so agile that it can deal with the issues and challenges, vicissitudes of the employee from whatever walk of life. If you have to wear different hats, wear hats being yourself. The hats are supposed to accommodate the people. The Muslim may want you to wear a kind, the Jew may want you to wear a different kind, but wear different hats and touch people. So HR has a heavy load that we'll talk about, and that's what I'm reminded about when I listen to you. Yes, thank you for that comment. Yes, Professor Hutt.
Yeah, just you mentioned wisdom and the fact that the young too can acquire this quality.
Yes.
And it reminded me of my community as a little boy, and this man, well-recognized man, and when he had drink his beer, well, it was really white rum, he said, without wisdom, the people will perish. I think this is a biblical thing. But over time, I've come to understand that it's about maturity, it's about experience, underpinned by knowledge, moderated by time. I've been thinking about this wisdom issue for a number of years.
Yeah.
And just the principles who do well.
Yes.
So I don't want to deny that the young should be able to acquire wisdom, because that's what we want. But it seems that I'm talking about me, I would want to say that over the past 10 years, my acquisition of wisdom, if it can be said in that way, has increased dramatically. And that's why if we want to teach, we need to be careful when we discard those who have matured. We tend to want to pay less attention. They're old. What do they know? So this is something that we have to combat. So as youngsters, as teachers, as HR persons, we need to seek to learn from others. And that this modern idea that we need to discard because we know all, we have to be careful.
Yes. Right. Very, very well represented, and you're touching on the wick of a big, long candle here, or maybe some dynamite. There's Alvin.
Yes.
You there?
Yes, I'm here. I just
We
wanted
have some.
Okay,
Yeah.
want to start now, but I had 2 new voices in the chat. I wanted, let me see, Natasha.
Hold on.
Natasha
Yeah.
says, wisdom is also gained when we open ourselves to learning from other persons and their experiences. It is also found in trial and error, found in moments when we take a chance or risk. And Colette, she says, I believe too that wisdom comes from experiences, observations, and from external stimuli that brings about an appreciation of the results, whether good or bad, and then making a decision on how to use it for the good of self and others.
Yeah.
So,
very good. Yes, I appreciate that. And please continue to do that. Just watch out for me because I don't see all those comments. Thank you for those comments. And I wasn't calling with regard to the time, but I will say that I will make time available to you. If maybe we should set a time and just agree, just to be respectful of people's time. If we do 20 minutes after the hour and make that a hard stop, is that good?
yeah, that's great. That's great.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I don't want to just go on and have people wondering, oh, is this going to be time? Are we almost done? So let's set 20 after. Captain, hold me accountable for that, please. And Miss Olivine. All right. So
Will
good.
do.
Very good. Yes. Okay, good. Now, okay, so just with regard to the trial and error, the comment about trial and error, yes, this is human experience. It's trial and error. But many people have been taught about objective truth, and they don't want to try anything else. I go to the Bank of Jamaica and I say, what about innovation and agility and creativity and so forth? They go, but this is a bank, and we're responsible for the laws and regulations that govern financial institutions. I don't mean to belittle my client here. I mean to suggest that inside that organization that has to do with regulations and structures that govern the monetary policy of Jamaica, there's ample room for innovation, yes? And the ability to do trial and error with managed risk. So you don't just go and try things willy-nilly. With managed risk will give you the opening to see creativity happen even in a bank that's governed by so many laws and rules. So trial and error is how people learn. And we spank our children and we give them red X's on their papers and we shame them when they try and fail. When they go off on a tangent and that's the wrong tangent, we punish them. And so they grow up learning that it's not safe to try. I'd better stick to the tried and true. And in that process, we are cultivating a nation of people who do not exercise innovation and creativity. Now, certain things they shouldn't try, like you shouldn't just go try cocaine. Yeah, okay, so there's some wisdom and guidance there. But when it comes to ideas for manufacturing things and for developing things and creating things and so forth, we need to be more accommodating of the ones who try and fail. We need to establish some latitude and give boundaries for people to operate within. And if they fail intelligently, reward them. So yeah, there's that. The trial and failure will lead to wisdom. Now, Professor Hutton, I agree with you, by the way. And here's another big subject that we can touch again when we come back together over the next few sessions. On the edge of your comment, or maybe deep in the heart of your comment, is one of the challenges we face in business and academia today, and it is the generational divide. We have the millennials, Gen X, Gen Zs, the Gen ABCs, and we have the baby boomer. And the baby boomer is on the way out to retirement, but the baby boomer has spent many years accumulating knowledge. And if you don't watch out, the younger generation just wants to cast it aside because they're not as computer savvy, they don't run as fast, and yet the accumulated wisdom is lost. And now they have to go make all the mistakes over and over. There's a little saying that came to me one day. Smart people learn from their mistakes. Wise people learn from the mistakes of others, in addition to their own. So some of that wisdom of learning from others' mistakes is being lost when we just push the youngsters. So I agree with you. But, you know, for somebody who had such a clear definition of what was good and bad, I now am clearly entrenched in the world of dualism. And so I have to look at the opposite condition. We who lament about the young generation and its capricious ways and its failure to be responsible and not wanting to stick to a job for more than a couple of years, and they want to stop their job and go to Paris right now and then come back and get the job back or some other job, and we see it as irresponsible behavior, must recognize that we produced them. We generated the present youngsters' psyche and sociographics and lifestyle, because they watched us, and I'm making generalizations here with notable exceptions, they watched us as baby boomers work our hearts out and work our hands and fingers out and go tired every day and go back overtime and go on weekends and come home and complain about the job and not spend time with them and leave them in front of the television and not go to the ball games with them. And we are all accumulating money so that we can retire comfortably. And when we accumulate the money, they watch the neighbors accumulate the money, retire, and die. And the young generation said, we don't want that. We don't want to work for 40 years and get a gold pen and a pension. We want to live now. So we have produced a generation, because of our deep dedication to work and industry, and they're seeing what it did to us as parents and as friends and family and so forth, they've reacted to it and gone to the opposite extreme and saying, look, life is, something that we need to live. Grasp the day, carpe diem, and so that's one first thing that we need to realize, Professor, that we, because of our extremities coming out of the Depression and being products of the industrial age, have created an environment the youngsters don't want. They are starting over and wanting to have life right now instead of working for years for it. Now, we can argue with it and say it's irresponsible. On the other hand, there are also some things that we can learn from them, because the typical employee in my generation had a principled affinity to work. After all, if you don't work, you cannot eat, and work is a wonderful thing. And none of that's wrong, but we've done it to a state where we believe it so fervently that we cause other sociological impact on the family and so forth. Here's what they want, and here's what we can learn from. The youngster will not stick to a job unless there's meaning and purpose in the job. So in my clients, you can't just give a young 25-year-old a job to do and say, you have 2 weeks to do it, get it done and bring it back to me. No, you have to say, let me tell you what that job is about and why it is so important to the big long-term vision of the company. Here's who we are, here's where we're headed, and you're contributing to the bigger picture. Otherwise, they have no interest. They must have a voice. They must feel like, even though they're not the senior executive, their opinion counts. So there's a suggestion box. They can come with crazy ideas and have them heard, if not implemented. They're looking for openness. They're looking for staff engagement. They're looking for meaning and purpose behind why the company even exists. And they also are not as materialistic as we are. They don't want big houses. They don't want massive cars. Some of them will be okay taking the bus. They're looking for the ability to move quickly and drop everything and just go over there without having to worry about their possessions. So these are some things that we're dealing with in our clients in leadership. But the point of the matter is, it is that duality. There's deep wisdom that the youngsters must not discard, because the ones who have it are older and a little slower, because with all their knowledge, they're going to make some bad mistakes and they can learn from the mistakes of others. At the same time, we who are in the older generation must not deal superficially with them and think that they are wrong, because in some ways we can learn from them. They have some values that will survive us. We are going to die. The world belongs to them. And so we can learn from each other. Professor Hutton, your quick response on that.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on your dual approach to this thing. We learn from each other, the young from the old from the young. So that must be maintained. But what we do not want to happen is that those, because you emphasize wisdom, and wisdom based on my knowledge and experience seem to come with time.
Yeah.
But for most human beings.
Yes.
They may be the minority of us, younger ones, who seem to acquire wisdom early. But as I say, it's underpinned by maturity.
Right.
It's underpinned by experience. Yeah.
And I want to make sure that I'm in good position. So I cannot disagree with you, because I'm a little over 29 myself. But I'm cautiously, I'm constantly reminded that this thing of maturity is a thing that can be applied to breadfruit. When breadfruit mature, it drop off and mash up, it's soft and pucky. Okay, so maturity is not an end in itself. Time-bound experience is not an end in itself, because there's some people who have lived for 90 years and 100 years and still not acquired wisdom. It is true, however, that with time we have more opportunity to acquire wisdom, and so hopefully we have, and we can share that with others. So a mature breadfruit is not something I aspire toward, because it gets weak and soft and not so good. Anyway, with that in mind, let me turn back to you, Miss Alvin. We have about a couple of minutes here. Anything else you want to do for the next couple of minutes so we honor the time? And I hand this to
where
you.
this conversation goes next, because several interesting ideas have come up, and I was actually thinking I'm going to negotiate with you. I enjoyed this thoroughly, so I was thinking that instead of us doing our daddy conversations going forward, perhaps we should plan some small group discussions, because I thought that the contributions were quite rich. So I don't know, maybe we can talk about that. But what perhaps people can tell us what they think we should talk about next, or your experience can tell us where you think we ought to be going next.
Yes, I'm very open to that. I think the small group interaction is good. Now, Captain Calvin and I, we use small groups in Zoom oftentimes, and we have 3.5 hours, close to 4-hour sessions. And these conversations get so rich that we can hardly do more than one of them, but one will be good. So we have 1.5 hours, which limits us there. But yes, let's talk about that offline, and we'll come back, because what I am thinking to do somewhere over the next several sessions, maybe the very next one, is talk about this thing about influence. You are preparing people to influence corporations. You are preparing people who are going to be influenced by corporations. What are some of the things that we can do as HR to make a difference beyond just the traditional? Because HR is in trouble today, and I will tell you more about that later. HR is in trouble because many companies in North America are regarding HR as just a side business. They take away all of the wonderful parts like hiring and training and development, and they give HR the policies and the firing and other things, because the HR people are regarded as not knowing the business. They're not mainstream. They're there to deal with the passive things and the difficult things. So how do you, as an HR practitioner, become relevant in the world of today's industry? And it begins with who you are as a person and becoming very clear and very sure about that. Yeah. I mean, for example, one of the things that I would advise you never ever to say in your life again is human capital. I cannot stand that word, because I go to capital and I see it as an industrial capitalist, utilitarian, functional, financial, economic term. And it is not. Human beings are not capital. And when they're capital, you don't get the most out of them. So there are lots of little things that have to do with HR, as I've seen it practiced in these large companies, some of which are coming to reckon with this now to get staff engagement and the subsequent productivity. So yes, to answer your question, let's talk about this offline, and you can gather any information you can from the team. But I am intrigued by the notion. Captain and I have had many conversations about HR, and we deal with that every day. And I look forward to our future discussions.
I certainly do. I know I see Jonardo, but let's finish that. And Lillian wanted to say something as well.
Okay. All right. So now I was on your time. You're now on my time, and I'll give you whatever time you need. So yeah, let's wrap up with whatever else going on. Go ahead, please.
Jonardo, can you make it in 1 minute, and then Lillian will come on.
Okay, Dr. D. You mentioned two concepts. And that would have run out of what you call it, Dr. Otten's Professor Otten's statement, where he spoke about maturity and experience. But personally, I have seen myself develop the application of knowledge, which is actually I term wisdom, through exposure. I believe that exposure is a separate concept from experience, because you can be experienced to the same thing over and over, which is technically what organization looking for. How many years you have been practicing a particular craft.
Yeah.
But exposure is a different thing. It speaks to levels. And when I say levels, you are exposed to different groups and different ways of doing things. And as Professor Abel told me once, you can never lead a person beyond who that person is. And that goes now into influence. That goes now into influence, because leadership inspires influence. In order to get people to follow you, they have to be influenced by you. And in today's organization, you have a lot of guys, as you would have said, now the socioeconomic times are different from back then. And you'll find that an HR person who comes into the organization today may be limited in exposure, even though they might have a lot of experience. So they might not be able to weave that, or to have that level of influence over the people they lead. So I will say that exposure is very important, and it's always good for you to acquire exposure.
Yes, very good. So I will not disagree with you, which by default means that I can agree with you. I will say this, that in the utilization of those words, what's necessary is for you to define the terminology of the narrative. And then once you stick to the definition, then it's perfectly fine. So some people it may mean something different by exposure from what you're intending, and they may mean something different by experience. But once you define the words in the narrative, then it's fine. Then you can have an intelligent conversation. So yeah, I agree with you. And I see the essence of what you're talking about. Got it. Okay, thank you. Oh, by the way, I cannot resist this temptation. Captain, I'm being tempted here.
Okay.
You can never lead a person beyond who the person is. Oh my goodness, we need to spend some time talking, Shanada, because I have a whole stream of what I regard as truth, as I would define it, that indicates that you're not a human was, you're not a human is, you're a human being. And being, that participle, is in the process of becoming. Human beings are not a thing that is a definitive point in time, a cross-section that can be measured. Who you are is unfolding throughout your life. So the idea that you cannot lead a person beyond who a person is just a cross-section of the present. The person is becoming. We are all becoming more. So yes, you can lead people in this transformation. Hence, this book that I wrote, If Caterpillars Can Fly, So Can I, is a troubling notion, because we think of caterpillars as caterpillars, and we think of butterflies as butterflies, but a caterpillar is in the process of becoming. So yes, you can lead a person beyond where the person is, because if you have past and present and future, reality is in the future. Oh, we got to talk some more about that, but I couldn't resist that temptation. Remind me if you are interested to talk that next time. All right, next comment, please.
Lillian.
All right. So as you rightly said, if caterpillars can fly, so can I. And when I heard your name, when I saw your name and recognized the email, that's exactly what came to me, because that is what I remember Alvin did. There's even a station that has been using some of your thoughts, continually as they're a part of their advertisement. So
Yes.
it's really an honor to be in your presence, to hear. I mean, you come across with such life, as you say, you're inspired. So of course you're breathing life into us. I mean, you're troubling our minds, you're stretching us, you're I mean, stimulation, us, all of those lovely things. And I'm really, I saw one of my colleagues post that it was incredibly thought-provoking. And I can say to you that being a part of this program has really helped me, because I'm from the narrative of, yeah, you're in the safe zone. You're just going in the safest zone possible. But I'm also, as you said, recognizing that there's so much more in me that need to come out. And so I'm happy that I'm getting the chance, based on what I do, to help persons to realize that there's so much more in you. And these conversations really need to go basically far and reaching, because I recognize that there are persons who is as if they really don't recognize that they are so much, they have come to the point, as you have rightly said, I'm settled. This is what people say I am, and I can't, this is what I am, and I'm not going to do anything else. And even sometimes when you try as leaders to push them a little, nudge them a little, they seemingly are afraid, and so they resist and they fight, and they believe that you're being against them, because they have come to the point that they think, oh, this is where I am, I can't go anymore. So as you have rightly said, as leaders, as HR practitioners, we really need to, and I'm going to borrow from you again, learn continually, empower others, achieve goals strategically, and develop leadership skills as we go along. And this is what you have, purported. And I'm really, 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 on behalf of this, group gathering, I'm saying to you, thank you so much for the way you have inspired us, the way you have, really troubled our minds and basically impacted us to become influencers and be insightful, and to recognize that, as you rightly said, wisdom is not something that you can, as you say, it's sometimes right up in your face and you're not seeing it, but it's about being flexible. It's about caring for people enough to, even though the books say do it this way, you are able to look beyond what the person is experiencing, or put yourself in their shoe at that particular time, and then make the best decision that comes out for them. So thank you so very much for your time. Thank you so much for pouring into us. We have been fed, we have been renewed, we have been stimulated, we have been enlightened, we have been blessed. Bless you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so
You're
much.
very kind and very gracious. Thank you so much. You're very gracious, very kind. And by the way, let me just add a thought. Janado, I see your comment that says you cannot lead a person beyond who you are. That's an important distinction, and yet the same truth is there, isn't it? You can lead a person beyond who you are because you can stand on the edge of the future and you can be in the process of becoming. In other words, if I am on my way up to a mountaintop I'd never visited before, I'm going to be a new person when I get there. I can have the language of vision to enrapture you and to magnetize my ideas so that you want to be a discoverer with me. So you're coming into a place where I am becoming more than I am. So yeah, but it's important to know you want to emphasize you cannot lead a person beyond who you are. And I'm saying it's the same way as if it were who they are. Anyway, very good. So thank you for the positive comment. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And let me go back to Miss Alvin. Anything else, Miss Alvin?
No, not really. I think we've done enough. There's enough for people to think about. So let them think, and we will meet again. Yes, you and I will talk, and we'll meet again. So really, I enjoyed myself thoroughly. An evening well spent. Very, very well spent.
Awesome. Keep up the good works, folk. Proud of you guys for the work you're doing, and I look forward to troubling on body and on mind on another occasion. Okay.
Disrupting our
Take
thinking.
care. All right.